for hours, relentless and heavy, drumming against the roof of the old mountain cabin like an unending war drum. Outside, the world was a blurred watercolor of darkness and motion, the silhouettes of pine trees swaying violently, their outlines slashed apart by flashes of white lightning. The wind howled like a living thing, sneaking through cracks in the wooden walls, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine resin. Inside, the air was thick with warmth and smoke from the fireplace. The flames crackled steadily, a comforting counterpoint to the chaos outside. A man sat near the hearth, hunched over a small table, his hands busy repairing a leather strap with slow, deliberate stitches. His dark green jacket hung open, revealing a worn flannel shirt beneath, the clothes of someone used to solitude, someone who preferred the company of fire and silence to that of people. He was used to storms up here. They came and went without warning, rolling through the high mountains with ferocity, and for years he had weathered them alone. But tonight was different. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way the wind kept changing pitch, or the uneasy flutter in his gut, but he had the feeling that something was coming. The first sign was faint, a muffled thud, barely audible over the roar of the rain. He paused mid-stitch, listening. For a moment, nothing followed, just the storm. He shook his head and bent back to his work. Then it came again, louder this time. He looked up. The sound wasn't the random banging of a loose shutter or a branch against the wall. It was deliberate, slow, uneven. Footsteps. He rose from his chair, his boots scuffing softly on the wooden floor, and reached for the rifle leaning in the corner. In the mountains, unexpected visitors in the middle of a storm were rarely good news. He moved to the door, his hand hovering near the latch, every sense straining. Another flash of lightning lit the cabin, bright enough to show the rain-smeared window. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a shadow move past it, low, stumbling. Then, just as quickly, darkness returned. He tightened his grip on the rifle and cracked the door open. A figure stood in the downpour, barely visible through the sheets of rain. A young woman, or what looked like one, was leaning heavily against the doorframe, her head bowed, long strands of wet, violet hair plastered to her face. Mud streaked her legs and arms, but it wasn't just mud. Even in the dim light, he could see patches of some strange green substance smeared across her skin, glistening like oil in the rain. Her lips moved, forming words he couldn't hear over the wind. Then her knees buckled. He dropped the rifle without thinking and caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was cold, almost unnaturally so, and the strange green sheen clung to his hands like a sticky film. It smelled faintly metallic, like copper mixed with damp moss. Hey, stay with me," he said, his voice low but urgent, though he wasn't sure she could hear. She tried to lift her head, her eyes flickering open for an instant. They were wide and sharp, but also distant, as if focused on something far beyond the cabin walls. He could have sworn he saw faint trails of green light in her irises before they fluttered shut again. He kicked the door closed against the storm and carried her inside, careful not to let her head loll too much. The fire's glow painted the room in shifting shades of amber and gold, but it seemed to highlight just how out of place she looked here, like a creature from another world, thrown violently into his. He set her down on a stack of folded blankets by the wall, the closest thing to a bed in this one-room shelter. She was trembling, her breath shallow, her chest rising and falling in quick, uneven bursts. Her leather dress clung to her like a second skin, and the green substance shimmered faintly whenever the firelight touched it. He crouched beside her, unsure of what to do next. He had patched up hunters, hikers, and even the occasional lost traveler before, but none of them had looked like this. None of them had come out of the forest coated in something that seemed to glow. Lightning flared again outside, casting jagged shadows across her face. For a moment, he thought he saw movement beyond the window, something tall, just at the edge of the trees. He blinked, and it was gone. The wind roared louder, rattling the panes, but he stayed focused on the woman in front of him. He grabbed a wool blanket and draped it over her shoulders, feeling her shiver beneath it. Her hand twitched, curling slightly, as if she were holding on to something invisible. He didn't know who she was, or what had brought her here in the middle of the worst storm of the season, but the unease he'd felt earlier now sat heavy in his chest. This was no ordinary traveler, and something told him this was only the beginning. The fire snapped and hissed as the wet logs shifted, sending a cascade of sparks upward. He sat back on his heels, studying her in the flickering light. The storm outside was relentless, battering the cabin with sheets of rain that seemed determined to push through the walls. But in here, the air was thick with something else, a strange, almost electric heaviness that seemed to radiate from the girl herself. Her breathing was still shallow, her lips pale. Water dripped from the ends of her violet hair, soaking into the folded blankets beneath her. He noticed small beads of the green substance clinging to her neck and collarbone, almost pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The way it caught the light was unnatural, not quite liquid, not quite solid. He reached out cautiously, brushing a fingertip across a small patch of it on her arm. It was warmer than her skin, almost alive, and the texture sent an involuntary shiver crawling up his spine. He quickly wiped it onto a rag, but the faint shimmer lingered against his fingertips, refusing to be fully removed. Her eyelids twitched. Slowly, she opened her eyes. They were striking, not just in their unusual green-gold hue, but in the way they seemed to focus on him with sudden clarity, as if waking from a deep, dangerous dream. "You!" Her voice was soft, raspy from the cold. "Don't touch it." He leaned closer, frowning. "Don't touch what?" Her gaze flicked to the rag in his hand, then back to him. She tried to sit up, but the effort sent her into a brief fit of coughing. When she leaned forward, he caught another glimpse of those glowing marks, not smeared, but embedded under her skin in thin, vein-like patterns, like light trapped in glass. "You're hurt," he said, keeping his tone level but urgent. "You need warmth, and maybe a doctor." "No doctor." She cut him off sharply, the sudden firmness in her voice almost startling against her weakened state. She gripped his sleeve, her cold fingers digging in just enough to make her point. "No one else." Her grip loosened, and she sank back against the blankets, her chest rising and falling in short bursts. He studied her face, the shadows under her eyes, the faint tremor in her jaw. She wasn't just tired. She was drained, as if something had been taken from her. And whatever this green substance was, she seemed more afraid of it than of the storm or him. The wind outside shifted, a deep, hollow groan passing through the trees. The firelight danced in response, and for a moment, the room felt smaller, more enclosed. He poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. She hesitated, glancing toward the door as if listening for something beyond the storm, then took it with both hands. Her fingers shook, and the cup rattled softly against the metal rim. She drank slowly, each swallow looking like an effort. When she finished, she didn't set the cup down. She just held it in her lap, staring at the dark water that remained inside. "Where did you come from?" he asked finally. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, her gaze slid toward the rain-streaked window, her expression tightening as if she could see through the darkness. "The forest," she said at last, her voice low. "Deeper than most people ever go." "That explains the mud," he said, though his tone was more probing than casual. "But not this." He gestured to the green marks running along her arm. She shook her head slowly. "It doesn't wash off. Not with water. Not with anything. What is it? Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw fear there. Not the panic of someone in immediate danger, but the deep-rooted fear of someone who has seen something they weren't meant to see. "It's not from here," she whispered. "And if you touch too much of it—" She trailed off, her voice breaking. "You'll change." He sat back slightly, processing her words. His first instinct was disbelief, some kind of delusion brought on by exposure, maybe. But he remembered the heat of the substance under his fingers, the faint pulse it seemed to have. She closed her eyes again, exhaustion overtaking her. But even in sleep, her hands twitched, clutching at the blanket as if bracing against some invisible force. Another crack of thunder shook the cabin, and he instinctively glanced toward the door. For a moment, he thought he heard something else beneath the storm, a faint, distant call, low and mournful, like a voice carried on the wind. He turned back to her, and the green glow under her skin seemed slightly brighter, as if reacting to the sound. Something was out there, and it wasn't done with her yet. The storm hadn't eased. If anything, it had grown more erratic. Long stretches of muffled silence broken by sudden, violent gusts that made the cabin walls shudder. The man sat at the table again, but the leather strap lay forgotten beside him. His eyes kept drifting to the woman sleeping on the blankets near the fire. She looked deceptively peaceful now, her breathing steadier, her damp hair spreading in dark waves across the wool. But the green glow beneath her skin remained, faint yet unmistakable, shifting slightly with each breath. He'd never seen anything like it, not in all his years in these mountains. And he'd seen some strange things. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his jaw. The logical part of his mind wanted answers. She had stumbled out of the forest in the middle of the worst storm of the season, half-frozen, wearing clothes that looked more suited for a hunt or a battle than a hike. Her skin bore those strange, luminous patterns, and she spoke of changes as if they were a death sentence. None of it made sense. Lightning flashed, bleaching the cabin in cold white light. His eyes flicked to the window and froze. For the briefest instant, he saw movement at the tree line. Something tall, humanoid, but wrong in proportion. Its limbs seemed too long, its stance slightly hunched. Then the darkness swallowed it again, leaving only the storm. He stood quickly, moving to the window. The glass was slick with rain, distorting everything beyond. He wiped a patch clean with his sleeve and peered out. Nothing, just the jagged shapes of pines and the swirling curtain of water. A low sound drew his attention back inside. The woman was stirring, her brow furrowing as if caught in some vivid dream. She muttered something too soft for him to catch, and her hands clenched at the blanket. He crouched beside her. "You're safe here," he said, unsure if she could hear him. Her eyes snapped open, and for a moment, she didn't seem to see him at all. She was staring past him, toward the door, her lips parted. "It followed me." The words hit him like a weight. What did? She pushed herself up onto her elbows, wincing. "Don't open the door, no matter what you hear." He stared at her. "You need to tell me what's going on. If something's out there." "You can't fight it," she interrupted, her voice urgent now. "Not like you'd fight an animal or a person. It isn't bound to this place. It moves differently." Her choice of words set his teeth on edge. Differently how? She shook her head, closing her eyes as if the memory itself pained her. "You'll know if you see it, and if you do, don't look at its eyes." He straightened, unease hardening into something closer to dread. He'd dealt with predators before, bears, wolves, even desperate people. But this sounded like the kind of story you only heard around campfires, told by those who wanted to scare others away from the deep woods. And yet, the way she spoke, she believed every word. The wind outside shifted again, this time bringing with it a faint, irregular knock against the cabin wall. Not sharp, like a branch, dull, rhythmic, almost like tapping. He moved to the door, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle. "Don't," she said sharply from behind him. The sudden force in her voice stopped him mid-step. "It's not trying to get in yet. It's measuring." He turned toward her slowly. Measuring what? Her eyes met his, and for the first time since she'd arrived, he saw not just fear, but something else. Guilt. "How much time I have left." The knock came again, louder this time, from a different spot on the wall. His grip tightened on the rifle, but he stayed where he was. He weighed his options. If this was some delusion, he could ignore her warnings and deal with whatever was outside like any other intruder. But something deep in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive out here, told him to listen. She sank back against the blankets, her breathing quickening. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If you open that door, it won't just take me." Thunder rolled through the mountains, long and low, shaking the floor beneath them. Somewhere far off, a strange answering sound rose. Not quite a howl, not quite a voice, but something in between. It came closer. The man set the rifle down beside the door, his mind working faster now. Whatever was out there, it wasn't going to leave just because they wished it away. And if she was right, they were already running out of time. But first, he needed the truth. He crossed the room again, crouched in front of her, and fixed her with a steady gaze. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." Her eyes shifted toward the window, as if she could see beyond the storm. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the rain. "I wasn't supposed to survive the first encounter." For a long moment, the only sound in the cabin was the hiss of rain and the restless shifting of the fire. The man didn't press her, but his eyes stayed fixed on her face, waiting. She sat very still, the flickering light casting shadows that made her features seem sharper, almost otherworldly. Finally, she drew a slow breath, as though bracing herself for the weight of her own words. "I was tracking it," she began, her voice low. "Not because I wanted to, but because I had to." The man didn't move. "It started weeks ago," she continued, her gaze distant. "Something began taking people from the outer settlements. Not all at once, one at a time. No one saw it clearly, just shapes in the trees, sounds in the dark. I thought they were stories meant to keep people close to home, until my brother didn't come back." Her fingers tightened around the wool blanket. "They said he'd probably wandered off trail, that maybe he'd gotten lost, or," she swallowed. "But I knew better. I'd heard the sound before. Low, long, like something calling from the bottom of a well." She paused, glancing at the window as if expecting to hear it again. "I went into the forest, deeper than I'd ever gone, past the dead groves, past the ridgeline where the light never feels right. The air there," she hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's heavier. You feel it in your bones, like the forest itself is leaning closer." He listened, his expression unreadable, but his hands rested loosely on his knees, the posture of someone paying close attention. "I found signs," she went on. "Not tracks, not like an animal leaves. More like—" Her voice trailed again, and when she spoke it was quieter, like something dragging its feet, but not on the ground. "And wherever it passed, the plants looked wrong, twisted, like they'd been touched by fire, but no fire had burned there." The man's brow furrowed. "And that's when you found it?" She shook her head slowly. "It found me. One moment I was alone, the next I wasn't. I didn't hear it move, didn't hear it breathe. I just knew it was there." Lightning flashed outside, and for a second, her eyes seemed to catch the light in an unsettling way. It didn't rush me. It just stood there, half hidden in the trees, watching. I couldn't see its face clearly, but I could see the eyes, pale like glass with this faint green shimmer. They pulled at me. I couldn't look away, no matter how hard I tried. Her hands twitched against the blanket, and her breathing quickened. That's when it stepped forward, and I understood it wasn't walking. It was just there, closer, like it had skipped the space in between. The man shifted slightly, his jaw tight. When it touched me, it didn't hurt. Not at first. It was like warm water running under my skin. Then it left this. She pushed the blanket down to expose the luminous lines along her arm. The green glow pulsed faintly, as if in answer to her words, and I could feel it inside me, moving, spreading. He stared at the marks, saying nothing. "I don't know why it let me go," she said. "Maybe it wanted me to bring it back to more people. Maybe it wanted me to change somewhere safe, where no one would stop it." Her voice faltered, but I ran. I didn't stop running until I saw the light from your cabin. Her eyes lifted to his. "If it's outside, it's not just after me. It's curious now. And once it decides to come in," she shook her head, "there's nowhere to hide." The wind howled again, and the fire shifted violently, making the shadows dance across the walls. For a second, the man thought he saw something move in the dark space near the door, a shape that didn't belong. He stood, moving toward the window, but the rain made it impossible to see more than a few feet beyond the glass. "Stay by the fire," he said, though the firmness in his voice didn't quite mask the unease. But when he glanced back at her, she wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed past his shoulder, toward the darkest corner of the cabin. Her lips parted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's already inside." For an instant, he thought she was delirious, her mind still half caught in fevered dreams. But the way her gaze didn't waver, locked on that shadowed corner, made his skin prickle. The firelight reached that part of the room only faintly, painting it in restless flickers of orange and black. Nothing moved. No sound came except the hiss of rain and the occasional low groan of the wind. He stepped toward it, slow and cautious. "There's nothing." The fire snapped loudly, sending a small burst of sparks into the air. In that flash of light, something shifted in the corner, not a full movement, more like the light bent differently around it for just a second. His hand closed around the rifle. The woman sat up, her voice harsh and urgent. "Don't look at its eyes." That warning made him stop mid-step. "It's here?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded once, her breath coming faster now. "If you can see it at all, it's already closer than you think." Another flicker of lightning filled the cabin with white light, and this time he saw it clearly. It wasn't standing. It was leaning, as though it had been there all along, impossibly still. Its outline was wrong, too tall for the room, yet somehow folded into the space. Its limbs were long, sharp at the joints, and the edges of its body seemed to blur, as if it was never meant to be fully seen. The light faded, and it was gone. But the air was different now, colder, heavier. The fire popped again, its warmth suddenly feeling distant. The woman's voice trembled. "It's not here for you, yet. But if you try to stop it," she trailed off, her eyes darting toward the door as if measuring escape routes that didn't exist. He kept his voice steady. "If it's after you, I can't just let it." A sound cut him off, not loud, but deep resonant, like the slow thud of something heavy against wood. It came from the wall beside the fireplace. One pause, then another. Tap, tap, tap. Each one seemed to sink into the floor, vibrating up through his boots. The woman's hand went to her chest, clutching the fabric there as if to hold something inside. "It's finding me," she whispered. "The marks, they're calling to it." He took a slow step back toward her. "Then we need to cover them. Wrap your arms." Before he could finish, the tapping stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself, like the moment before a predator strikes. And then, from the window, a pale reflection appeared. Two faint green points, not quite glowing, but catching just enough light to be seen. Her voice rose sharply. "Don't." But his eyes had already locked on them. The world seemed to tilt. The fire's crackle dulled to a distant hum. The storm outside muffled, as though someone had thrown a thick blanket over reality itself. The green points grew brighter, filling his vision, and with them came a feeling. Not fear exactly, but a pull, an invitation. Somewhere far away, he heard her voice shouting his name. Something warm gripped his arm. Her hand, trying to pull him back. He blinked hard, breaking the contact. The green points were gone, replaced by the shifting, chaotic pattern of rain on glass. His breath came fast. What was... "Don't speak to it," she cut in, her tone fierce. "If it knows you can see it, it will never leave you alone." Another sound rose outside, this one unmistakable, a long, low moan, almost human but warped, stretched into something that scraped at the edges of his mind. The fire flared high, as if reacting to the sound, and the green lines on her skin glowed brighter than ever. She clutched at her arm, gritting her teeth. "It's close enough to feed." The door rattled suddenly, not from wind, but from something pressing against it, slow, deliberate pressure. His grip tightened on the rifle. "If it comes through..." "You won't stop it with that," she said. The wood groaned, the latch quivering under the strain. In the chaos of the storm, the man made a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. He stepped toward the door. Lightning lit the room, and for one frozen heartbeat, a shadow fell across the floor from a shape just beyond the threshold. The proportions were wrong. The edges seemed to crawl. The latch began to lift. The woman screamed, and then the door burst inward,